Greetings, everyone, and welcome to part one of the Governor's Office Native American Heritage Month Brown Bag series covering Native representation and state leadership, navigating appointments to the Newsom administration. My name is Christina Snyder, and I am a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the tribal advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the land I'm joining you from is the ancestral homelands of the Patwin peoples. The goal of this Brown Bag series is to increase Native representation in state leadership by demystifying the processes of getting appointed to leadership and advisory positions within the Newsom administration, as well as the process for getting into elected positions within the state. In part one, we'll be exploring the appointments process, and in part two, taking place at the same time next Thursday using the same Zoom credentials, we'll be walking through the process of getting your name on the ballot. The governor firmly believes that California is stronger when all Californians are visible, heard, and welcomed at all levels of policymaking, and we hope that these sessions can help encourage that for Native populations throughout the state. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics for today's meeting. First, we are recording today's presentation, and we'll be posting this to the Tribal Advisor website at tribalaffairs.ca.gov and the Tribal Advisor Facebook page. You have all been muted and your cameras have been disabled. I ask that you remain muted until we get to the comments and questions portion of today's presentation, though the appointment secretary may call for questions and comments during her presentation, and you have the ability to unmute yourself as well. Once we get to the comments and questions portion of today's presentation, you can ask questions by using the raise hand function. If you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to use your app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you have difficulty, you can also directly message me that you have a question and I'll call on you. If you've called in, we'll first go through raise hands for questions, but we'll then open the webinar to any dial-in questions. And at that point, you can unmute your line using *6. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and I'll now turn it over to Katherine Rivera Hernandez, our Appointments Secretary for Governor Gavin Newsom, to begin the presentation.
Thank you so much, Christina, and I'm glad to see everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I know these days are very different and hectic now, living in a new normal. As you can imagine, I could not have foreseen a year and a half ago what I was getting into in this administration, and with COVID and wildfires and power issues. What have I have really had a long discussions with the governor about was just how important it is to have the right people in critical positions. We have really seen that in a way that I don't think we've ever been able to see up close before. But as many of you have probably heard the governor say, he wants an administration that looks like the population it serves. And this is even more important during this time period. He wants people who are really committed to addressing the disparities that exist in California and are really committed also to just making sure that all communities will thrive. And that is why when we talk about diversity, we talk about it not so much in the traditional sense. Of course, gender diversity is paramount, ethnic diversity is paramount, geographical diversity is paramount. But what we spend most of our time talking about really is the diversity of history and experiences that we need, which often come from where we grew up and where we live and where we work. So it's the kind of diversity, just a little bit about myself, where I was born to parents who grew up working in the fields, and while raising me were able to, get into entry-level jobs, go to night school.
One moment. It looks like Katherine may have some horseshoe internet issues. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I think she'll jump back on in just a second.
So sorry about that. I did this from the governor's office, from the office, because it never goes out. And then of course, there it goes. So sorry about that. So, we have positions and approximately 300 boards and commissions. So the idea that you have to know somebody kind of goes out the window with those types of numbers. The reality is that we have to use the online application process, and we do. The one at gov.ca.gov/appointments. And there you will see a link to the online application. Of course, if you do know someone, and now you know me, absolutely use them. I tell people, anybody who can attest to your talents, to your commitment, to why you're the appropriate person to serve is really what you want. It's always about people who can really, where it's value added and not so much quantity, more about quality. On our website also, we have links to the boards and commissions where we have vacancies, which is updated monthly. We also have a list of deputies, and I have an entire team that helped me to fill these positions, and it has their portfolios. So not only can you see what is available, but you can also contact the deputy who is responsible for that directly. I myself have been on the other side of this process 5 times. So I bring a really different perspective, having been on that side, and that is that we are, really committed to being engaged, and that this is a collaborative process. We're trying to find the right fit for people, but also just respect people's time and commitments as well. And so I have a very responsive team, so you can always reach out to them directly. We do have, for those of you that are very happy in your current jobs, we have the volunteer boards and commissions, and we have what I say, we have a board for everyone. Anything you might have an interest in, we likely have a board that that sort of works in that space. But we also have the one thing we don't currently have online, and that I'm working on getting on there, are just priority appointments actually with the administration. As many of you are probably aware, we do have a lot of positions that are specifically tribal advisor positions that we have filled, but we have people working throughout the administration, and that is in emergency services, in early childhood education, and health, housing. So, if you are interested in actually joining the administration, and given the recent events of not only COVID fatigue, but also the most recent election, we are losing people. We do lose people who take on new life opportunities or decide to spend more time with their grandchildren every day. So we are constantly sourcing for individuals to both join the administration in a paid and in a volunteer capacity. And then just back to the application, if you haven't seen it before, it is fairly detailed. It does ask some really sensitive questions, and the team is always available to sort of address those with you. It is entirely confidential. The only individuals who see those applications are people within the appointments team. So even the people that you will ultimately end up interviewing with don't see the applications. The governor doesn't ask to see them. I'm sure if you wanted to, he could, but even within the horseshoe, nobody sees the application. It is strictly held within the appointments team. And so what I just tell people is to simply be honest. I was very sincere, and this governor is very serious about wanting people who have experienced something that has drawn them to service. We have people we have appointed. You have a bankruptcy. Hey, you gave it a shot. You tried something. Something didn't work out. What did you do after that? We have people who have served time for poor choices they might have made as a young person, who have improved their lives, improving the lives of others. This governor is all about a comeback story, because many of us, if you haven't made a mistake, you probably haven't been trying hard enough. So I just tell people, please don't let that discourage you, and please don't take yourself out of the game. Let's at least have a discussion about it. And then the other thing I suggest is, if you have a certain board or commission or position that you are interested in, is to Google it. That is going to be the easiest way to figure out the time commitment. How often, right now we know where we're all meeting, we're all on Zoom, but just how often they meet. Every board and commission is different. There's not really a standard. Some boards meet quarterly for 2 days, some meet every other month. It really does vary, but you can get a really good idea of the issues they're discussing, how complex they are, and how much time you think that commitment might be by Googling it. The other really smart thing you can get from that is how controversial that board or the issues are. Some people don't want their name in the paper. So if you don't, that'll give you a good idea of whether that's a likelihood or not. And then once we start looking at the applications, and what I will say is anytime we're looking at a board or commission, we're really putting a puzzle together. So we don't go in and pull every application from the entire state for that role. What we do is we look at who came off of the board. Was it an accountant? Was it a marketing person? Was it a nonprofit? Was it an organizer? Was it an attorney? We're kind of looking to put together people who's not only have various voices, various occupations, but it really is kind of putting that puzzle together. And then the other part of it, as I mentioned, is geography. Very often we have noticed that there are areas that as far as the Central Valley and the Inland Empire, which are vast, that have been underrepresented on boards and commissions. So very often we will be also looking for specific areas. So it is a narrower search than I think people might think. But again, that's why the deputies are so, and also I said, if you look at a board that you really want to serve on and there aren't any vacancies right now, still reach out because people roll off constantly. We have people that get termed out as well. So it may not be open now, but it may be open in 4 months or 6 months. So better to start having that conversation now with us because ultimately down the road, there will be opportunities. Once we'll start narrowing down candidates, we will then schedule interviews. And those interviews are done at a department level. They are done then at an agency level. And then they are also interviewed within the governor's office. We in appointments participate in every single interview for every single position. And then we bring in people like Christina and ledge people and policy people and cabinet to help us assess candidates. And again, that is a collaborative process. We're not there to weed people out. We really are there to get to know individuals and to get to know their stories. We already have the resumes. We already have the job experience. We really want to know who the individual is because that's what the governor wants to hear about when we go in. And so once we narrow it down to a single candidate, then it just comes down to paperwork. And I go in with the chief of staff, and then ultimately I meet with the governor. I meet with him weekly. I usually take in anywhere between 20 to 30 individuals each week. So that gives you also an idea of the kind of the workload we're talking about and the opportunities that are available. And then of course, a lot of big picture policy issues and that we might be trying to address in appointments. And then at that point, it really comes down to the press release and really then after that, it's the work. So once, all of the sort of excitement, then it really comes down to really just being a contributor and a partner sort of in that board and commission. I really want to hear questions because I'm sure people might have some specific issues they want to discuss. So why don't I'll stop there.
Thank you. And so if anyone has a question, feel free to unmute your line at this point, or even better, turn on your camera and ask a question.
Hello, my name is Scott Lathrop. I was just trying to get some information in reference to appointments to supervisory board. In our county, San Luis Obispo County, we had a death, and of course the governor is going to have to appoint a supervisor. I have turned in the application and all that, but I was trying to find out a little bit if the process is the same there since it's an elected position or versus a commission.
It is different, and as we actually have 3 right now that are up there that I am discussing with the governor. The application process is the same, but in those cases, it's usually a direct conversation between the governor and I. I spend a lot of time talking to the people in the community. As you can imagine, every time there's an opening like that, it really requires diving in deep to figure out the history and the past and who is where and how things have worked before. And so I anticipate the governor making a decision on all three of those county decisions fairly soon, at least now that we've gone through the election process. And so, yeah, I anticipate, and I will be reaching out to you once he does that.
Okay, so my understanding too for San Luis Obispo County, there's I think 9 of us so far, and I noticed on the website that I think you're still taking applications. Is there a deadline for that specific position, or is it going to be open until they fill it? As far as taking applications,
there's not a deadline, but I do not believe that, I don't anticipate, I should say, anybody else applying, because we have done a lot of the legwork already. And so my hope is that then once we make a decision, obviously then it would be closed.
Mm-hmm. And then with that position, it was recommended by local people like other supervisors that was appropriate to turn in letters of recommendation and things of that nature. I'm assuming that will play a part in that overall process.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay. And those can be sent to me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I would add to that applies kind of across the board, right, Katherine? That letters of recommendation are helpful in determining, in the governor's determination, correct?
Yeah, they really are. I mean, not only do you just get a feel for sort of the sectors that are supportive of an individual, but again, what is also very helpful is when somebody can actually talk about the experience and why, how they know the person and why they think that they're the right choice.
Other questions? You can go ahead and unmute your line. You can raise your hand, or if you're calling in, you can do *6 to unmute your line.
Hey, Christina. I was just wondering about any employment opportunities that you know of, and are they all out of Sacramento or are they statewide?
So they are statewide. Specifically, I do know that we have an assistant secretary position available for tribal affairs over at our resources agency. But again, we have many needs. We have needs in communication. We have needs for lawyers. We have needs for legislative people and policy people. So numerous opportunities available right now. And as far as where you do not have to be based in Sacramento, no, and especially even more so now I think we've all sort of realized that, we're all able to engage from where we are. So we have even secretaries that live in the Southern California area, and we have other secretaries, department directors that live in Northern California, in the Bay Area. So it definitely does not require a move to Sacramento.
And then again, those links too are in the chat. So the first link is the general appointments page. The second link is the vacancy report from October. The third link is the office assignments, if there's anybody that you want to talk to specific to the appointment that you're looking at. And then the last link is the application for appointment. And if we get to a point where nobody's asking questions and there's no more updates, I might actually walk you through all of that. But if there's more questions, please feel free to unmute your line, turn on your camera, or raise your hand. And again, if you're calling in, it's *6 to unmute.
Yes, one more question in reference to filling out the application. Once you fill that out, I know that I filled one out earlier in the year for 3 different possible positions. Does that stay current, and people will, your screening team, will they continue to look at that over time? Or is it important to apply every 6 months or something of that nature?
No, you don't have to do that. But what you can do, and what I will do now that we've spoken, is that you can always reach out and see where that deputy might be with that position. That's always very helpful. And that's not at all, I mean, I always encourage people to feel free to do that. That's why they're there. This is our jobs. And so we welcome those inquiries. So I personally will follow up with and take a look at your application and see what those positions were and figure out what deputy needs to follow up.
Great, fantastic.
Yep.
One thing that might be helpful for this group too to understand is that during the peak of COVID, the governor's schedule was so insanely crazy that appointments were basically, they were being processed, but he reviews every single appointment. And so, you know, the timelines got shifted. But I think now, well, I can't speak to that right now, but since COVID is climbing back up, if you all weren't aware, it is. So we are kind of going back into response mode here, but that if you did apply earlier in the year prior to March, that it could be that your application just was on hold because we couldn't process things as timely as we would otherwise be able to.
Thank you, Christina, for mentioning that. Yeah, when I 20 years ago was in the Davis administration and handled emergency services at that time. And so when you're correct, when COVID hit, the governor actually signed an executive order extending all of the appointments deadlines and moved me over into emergency response. So it was everybody where you needed to be and all hands on deck. So my deputies were doing their best, but as you can imagine, I and the governor, when we were meeting, it wasn't about appointments. And it really, again, highlighted for us as the months went on that, you know, people adjusted very quickly and said, wait, I want to be a part of this, or, you know, I still want to serve and I still want to engage. And so I'm very happy that now I have been back full time now for a few months, and hopefully we'll stay doing appointments at this point.
Additional questions, comments? It's *6 to unmute your line if you're calling in. You can also type into the chat if you don't want to speak. Do you have anything you want to say right now, or would it be okay if I share my screen and kind of go through all of these?
Oh, yeah, no, that'd be fine. Would you like me to stay on?
Yes, please. I'm going to just very quickly go through the website just so people are comfortable with where they need to go. So for the appointments for the Newsom administration, you go to gov.ca.gov/appointments. Here, you can apply here. And then let me minimize my video so that I'm okay. And the resources that the appointment secretary was talking about earlier are here. And this gets updated. And so these are the vacancies that we are seeing right now. And you can go down if you know what you want to do. You can go straight to that vacancy, or you can go straight to that thing. So like, I want to be on Delta Stewardship Council, and look, there's a vacancy. So what does this all mean? In this parentheses, this is the kind of appointment that you're looking at. And Katherine, feel free to jump in if you'd like, but if it's, go ahead.
Yeah, so you will see very often for many of these, they're what we call slotted. So a lot of them will talk about if you have to be, for example, right now we're looking for a CPA who has auditing experience, or you have to be from a certain county to serve. And so when you see public, that is somebody who really has no vested interest. So many of our boards, you have to be a licensee of some sort. You have to either be a podiatrist or be a geologist or an engineer. When you see public, that means you essentially cannot be or have a vested interest in that board. So you're not a licensee, you're a member of the public. It is the toughest position for us to recruit for, because normally people want to be in an area where they are actually working. But what we're looking for is accountability. That for us is the accountability slot for the people of the state of California. They also very often are the ones that we have relationships with. I don't like to say like eyes and ears because we're not spying on anybody, but we tend to have that sort of a more of a collaborative relationship with the public slot. So they are very important. The other thing I will say is they are a great way if you just want to start out to see what it's like to serve on a board, or what I tell people who are younger in their careers, because in a lot of places you have to have a certain level of experience, or people that you're competing with people who have been working in a space for 5 to 10 years. That is really a great place where we look to put individuals who just want to sort of start out their public service on a board. And we do appoint people from all parties, by the way. And in some cases, we actually have to appoint people who are not Democrats. But I will just say, just as a general comment, we consider appointees from all political parties.
Great. And so what I would say is there's a lot of vacancies on here that look like things that would be really great to have a Native appointee on. So for example, travel and tourism in the High Sierra, that could be perfect for a tribal appointee. Pretty much every single thing here, since tribes span everything. So women and girls, obviously, no brainer. Water quality, all of this stuff. Teaching, all of these. Sierra Nevada Conservancy are areas where we could use the unique experience of people who are from the Native community. But again, another thing to point out is that just because there isn't a vacancy doesn't mean that you can't apply to a board. And so I don't know if Katherine, you want to speak to this, but there are some boards that are at pleasure of the governor. And so if he wants to put someone on that board and he likes your qualifications and thinks it will mix it up a bit, feel free to apply for those boards too, or commissions.
Yeah, I think the California Horse Racing Board is probably a really good example of that. Honestly, the 4 years I spent in the Davis administration, I never even knew there was a horse racing board. It was so quiet, and I don't know, I guess they were keeping their heads down. That clearly changed, and when I came into the administration, that was all I heard about. And this governor has a very distinct opinion about really wanting about the health of the animals, health of the jockeys, all of that, while also maintaining the sport. And so we made many changes over there over a period of time. And that's sort of a reflection of that, where you didn't necessarily have vacancies at the time, but sometimes we would just make changes for policy reasons. And
then here is where you'll click to find which deputy is in the area or has the jurisdiction over the thing that you want to serve on. So that's on the main page again, this sidebar. You can look at current board and commission appointees here. There's a lot of them. And then the online application is here, but first you'll also have to, when you submit your application, submit a release, and your application is not complete without it. So that's just something to note. If anyone has submitted an application and isn't sure what's happening, it might be because you didn't submit the full thing. So here's the application page. It asks quite a few questions, but this is kind of the deal. It's a fillable form, and I believe you also have to print and mail it unless we've changed that under COVID.
I don't think you have to do that. I think you can just submit it. And if anybody has any trouble doing that, because again, this system is incredibly old. I filled out that exact same application 20 years ago. So also feel free to reach out. I think sometimes people have trouble and they don't want to ask because they think, oh my gosh, it's going to make it look like I can't submit a form. How can I, do anything? Trust me, it's not you, it's the system. We're working on it. So if you have any troubles with the submission as well, please contact us.
Great. And then we have, what does Dem/comp mean?
And so that it probably means that one is you have to be a Democrat. And two, this is also an important point. Many times you will see a competence in is what it's referring to, a competence. So we should spell that out. A competence in the subject matter or a knowledge in the subject matter. What I will say is that is a very low bar, not a high bar, because we're trying to accept as many people as possible and bring in as many people as possible. So when we talk about an interest in water quality, I think we could all say we have an interest in water quality. So it does not mean you have to be an expert in water quality or have worked in water on water issues. So, if you care about, the water supply, that for us is an interest, and that's passable for us. It's important. Our whole point is we want people, we want to bring a certain lens to all of these issues. And you only get that by having a diverse group of individuals. We are definitely not interested in a group think type of board or commission. We really want varied viewpoints expressed.
And then one other point that I'd like to make is, even if you've been proactively reached out to by someone that from the administration, or who has said you'd be a great fit for this, we think you should pursue it, or you've had even informational interviews, until you submit, if it's an appointed position, until you submit that application with the release, you're not really in the running until that happens. So we've had situations where we have people who've expressed interest in serving on a commission, and months later they still haven't submitted that appointments application. So we're still in a place where we can't really move forward, because that all needs to happen before we can move forward. So for example, with some commissions, they undergo, Senate confirmation, which means that we need to kind of kick tires on everything that the Senate could potentially ask about, because they're going to ask you the same tough questions that we're going to ask you. And that doesn't mean that should be a hurdle, but I think that the appointments team really needs to have all of that in place, and have the application and have all of the things moving along, so that they can be able to get you in the place you need to be.
Yeah, Christina, and that's really important, because as you can imagine, especially with the number of people that we have, a very social governor. Everybody has his phone number, and everyone calls and texts him, and over his long career. And it's really important for us to make sure that people have that, one, it's transparent, and that people have confidence in the process. And as a result of that, every single person has to fill out the application. There are no exceptions. For us, even though we don't ever release the applications, we often get inquiries. We call the public records requests from reporters saying, did that person fill out an application, or did they have to follow the process? And our response is always, yes, they did, because we make sure that is done before we move to step 2 every single time.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point with the governor being such a sociable governor. Even if you talk directly to the governor about potentially wanting to be in a certain position, it's really important that you touch base with Katherine to make sure that she's aware of that conversation, because we're pretty good at communicating. Gov's pretty good at communicating, but it's always good to over communicate in this kind of situation, so nothing falls through the cracks, and so that we can make sure that you're getting to where you need to get to have that. I get
a lot of screenshots, but I'm sure I don't get all of them. At least I can't imagine that I get all of them. So very true, very true.
And then we have a question for you. The application process is to fax or mail the signed releases. Is there a way to send the signed form via email or DocuSign?
Yes, you can do that. And again, this is great, because it's something else I should probably add, especially because it's kind of a post-COVID. And that is like, absolutely, you can probably even take a picture of it and email it, or however you want to do it. Is fine.
And then one note that I wanted to note, and this is all because I've asked a million questions about a million different positions, is that if you are interested in a board or commission that is Senate confirmation, or is under Senate confirmation, you, and feel free to add, Katherine, you can start serving on that board prior to Senate confirmation, but it's just basically, you have to be confirmed within the year?
Yes. Yeah, just have to be confirmed within the year. Yes, and you can start at any time, really, after the press release goes out. And for those that, I know some of you are probably very familiar with the Senate confirmation sort of process, but for those that are not, because again, it sounds really kind of frightening, and most of our positions are Senate confirmable. We really work very closely with the Senate and with the Pro Tem and Rules Committee, who are the people who run those commissions. And the process is simply they will send questions in writing. I have a deputy who works with every single person going through Senate rules on those questions. She will also prepare you for your hearing, which will ultimately happen, where you appear before the 5 senators. And but they will also reach out and want to talk to you beforehand. There are, I would say, there are very few surprises. You usually know what's coming. Usually know if there are going to be any issues. So I've had a few tough ones serving on the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, but really everything that was asked of me were things that are issues that people should be concerned about, and that I knew were coming and was able to address. So we work really hard to make sure that there are not any surprises. So I would hope that would not be a deterrent for anyone.
And to find out whether it's confirmable, I'm going to share my screen again because it's also on the website. You can go to Statutory Index of Positions 2019. And if it's got a little SC after it, then that's Senate confirmable. So as you can see, some of them are just like Coastal Conservancy, not Senate confirmable. A lot of the positions that that we have within the administration are not Senate confirmable because they're within the administration and not subject to that. But you know, if it's a specific position that's under statute, you probably have to take a look at that statute, or you can talk to the appointments team to see whether it is. So for example, you know, there are a lot of like the Office of the Tribal Advisor, or the Tribal Advisor is now a statutory position, but it's also not subject to Senate confirmation. And so that's something that's in the statute that you would have to find and figure out. But most of our positions, you know, like the Assistant Secretary position that the Cabinet Secretary referenced earlier, are not Senate confirmable. You know, the deputies that I have in the Heritage Commission and in the Tribal Advisor Office are not confirmable. But so it's, you know, it's depends on the statute. Additional comments, questions, concerns. It's *6 to unmute your line if you've called in. And then also, if you have, you know, something that you're interested in, you can always reach out to the appointments office and just let them know, and they can kind of help you through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Folks are,
Hi.
oh, good.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Hi, Katherine. Nice to meet you. My name is Brandon Fraley, and I was chatting in the chat box earlier just because I have a bunch of kids that are homeschooling. But my question, the follow-up question, thank you for answering the question to be able to email the release forms, but do you have an appropriate person who it should directly go to? Should it go to the person that reviews the application for what you're applying for, or is there a general email for that collection?
You know, I always say, I mean, if you have, you know, if you can connect the deputy to it, I would send it directly to the deputy. We do have a general appointments email, but I always hesitate just because you can actually get it to the person that it ultimately needs to go to. What is it that you're interested in?
The Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs for the Resource Agency.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's you'll see her name on her. Her name is Kristen Stoffager, and you can email her directly.
All right, thank you very much, ladies, and everybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had another really good question. So for Native American appointments, do they need to be done through a resolution from the Tribal Council? I don't think that there's any right now that have that requirement under statute, but there are some that need to have nominations from either tribes, tribal communities, or tribal organizations. And the ones that I'm thinking about specifically are the Native American Heritage Commission, where you have to have letters of support from one of those bodies. I think having a resolution from a tribal council is really persuasive for the governor and for the appointments office. something that I mentioned earlier about having letters of recommendation. I think from the Native appointments perspective, the more, broad-based support you have, the better. So if you have consortia like TASIN or like the Chairman's Associations that support your appointment, I think that helps the governor understand whether, this is someone who has broad-based community support that he will feel confident in appointing without getting a bunch of calls on the back end. And so I think, anything that's supportive, resolutions from tribal council, because they're government documents and because they indicate the support of the entire community, I think are really persuasive in that way. But I don't think that, to my knowledge, there's anyone that statutorily requires that.
Aside from that, I also make a pitch for the fair boards. I know, I'm not sure if everybody thinks about them or may not know exactly what they do, but the fair boards that we have in every county are really the governing boards. They are, I look at them as, they are the people operating the business of the fair. And there's a lot of business. And especially right now, I know it's not as enticing as it used to be because it's tough with COVID. But it is one of those areas that we have a tough time recruiting for, but it's so critical because we need people who are willing to go in and operate essentially like a board of directors for these fairs and make some really tough decisions around business, but it can also be fun around marketing, around what kind of programs you're going to be, can bring in. A lot of fairs are doing different drive-by events, and post-COVID, it is obviously very important that we have individuals engaged, and it's just also a great way to give back to those areas, and it really requires people who live in those areas to do that. So just a pitch. And Samantha Diaz is the deputy for all fair boards. God bless her.
Are there any other bodies like that where you would like to see more applicants?
I mean, we really are, any of the licensing boards that you see, we always need people. And I mean, even just seeing the list of vacancies, it's like, I get anxiety because it's, we have so many needs on licensing boards and on our fair boards. Like we just cannot get enough people to engage. And so if you do just decide to apply for any of those, again, please flag it for the deputy and flag that it came from this conversation. Because they also know that I'm and are aware that I'm having these, these conversations, and it's just helpful for them too.
I would flag too, if you have specific skills. I think we will probably need more people in the governor's office and throughout the administration. So if there's anywhere that seems interesting to you, I think that the appointments team can always have those conversations. One-on-one. One thing I did want to flag is because this came up before in a prior administration, but I think it's still probably something that, the appointments team thinks about is, there's ethical considerations that need to be taken into account if someone's a sitting tribal leader, since they're an elected official of another jurisdiction. So depending on whether you are serving for, even another constitutional officer, there's a lot of things that kind of go into whether the appointments team may be able to put you in a certain spot, but could have other options potentially for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you're correct. Yeah. And we also, I will just say, we have a legal team as well. We run into issues with just electeds, generally across the board, but can kind of see if there's any conflicts or any issues that might arise and kind of work through those.
Additional comments, questions, concerns, and it's *6 to unmute if you've dialed in. And then can you serve on multiple, I think I know the answer, but multiple boards or commissions?
You can, but for this administration, we are generally not allowing people to serve on multiple boards and commissions, just because we're obviously trying to encourage more participation from others. And so we have generally, if some people are already serving on something, very often we'll look at those people, especially if they're doing a great job, and try to move them into a higher profile board to serve. And then we usually ask them to come off of that board so that we can allow somebody else to have an opportunity.
Great. And then all appointees need to file Form 700s, correct?
That is correct. Yes. There's a few exceptions, but the vast majority will have to fill that out with all of your financial, sort of interests. And again, it's a conflict type of form. That's what they are looking for. And there are rules about, how much, how much of an interest you have in a business or that sort of thing. Also, if you have multiple, we run into this, frankly, with celebrities, where if you have multiple homes, you do not have to necessarily put your personal residence, but you would have to put other homes, and not everybody is clearly comfortable with doing that. But that's,
yeah, and those are publicly available forms that are, it's under the Fair Political Practices Commission. Every appointee has to submit on an annual basis or be subject to fine, basically. But it's also kind of an ethical check for the governor. And because you are kind of a representative of the governor when you're an appointee, it's just making sure that everybody is kind of living up to the standards of California state law. One thing I did want to flag, because I don't know if this is actually like known or not, but it's something that we've actually just kind of accidentally discovered at the Heritage Commission, is that the FPPC considers income from tribal sources, so per capita income, as something that you do need to report on your form. So that's also something that if you're not comfortable doing, it's something to think about. Additional comments, questions, concerns? Okay, well, hearing none, then I think that we can wrap, and everybody can, if you haven't eaten yet, I haven't, go grab lunch for like 8 minutes if you have a meeting at 1. But really appreciate your joining us, Katherine. And if anybody has follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to the appointments team. I can also help direct you in the direction you need to go, and hopefully we can get some good representation throughout the administration. Katherine, do you have any closing remarks?
No, just thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been great. Hopefully we'll do it again.
Katherine and Christina, thank you very much. It was very helpful. Hopefully be in contact with you guys soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next week. Take care.